I did make everyone a co-host, so thanks for taking advantage of that. Um, let's start the agenda. I have the first item to talk through our OKRs, I guess, and I do think that all managed contributions to our product OKRs have been completed, which is great. I will say that this is the last month, and anything we need to ship needs to slide into 13.2, which is basically no time left in the milestone. So just something to keep in mind. Correct. If it needs to be delivered in a milestone, it's application change. Cool. Dennis, I don't know if there's anything to say about your item there.
No, I mean, to be honest, I haven't taken a good look at the throughput metrics. I will be this week just because we're going to be doing planning and so on. But next month will be a focus for the video series. That's the only clarification point I wanted to make, as far as like, we still have August to get non-milestone tied deliverables done. So calling myself out on that.
I'll be really interested to see how the throughput metrics kind of pan out. We talked, I think, in a meeting about baselining and seeing actually, because we just did like a flat 20% increase across like all groups, and whether or not that's realistic is another point for discussion. So looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I put an item here, like next time, let's consider organizing by OKRs by group. This came up in a product discussion recently, and I think that it really would be helpful. And when I say organized by group, it would be nice to have like an epic or a way to track to say like the compliance group. Here are the product, engineering, and UX OKRs that apply to this group. And right now they're a little challenging to track. So something to keep in mind as we do our OKR planning for Q3.
Should we get started with that pretty soon? Because OKRs, the next quarter is about to start pretty soon.
I need to re-educate myself on the OKR process, but yes, I think that would be a great thing to do in Q3. The engineering OKR epics were really challenging to follow personally, but that's more related to the engineering leadership in this call. So.
Yeah. In what way were they? I'm curious. In what way were they hard to follow? I know there's like a bunch of like epic links and numbers, so it wasn't as descriptive as it could have been in that table. So
yeah,
I think that's
there was the single source of truth. My comment was related to it'd be nice to have a single source of truth for every group, so that in planning meetings and in weekly meetings, individual groups can have a clear place to review this kind of thing. At the moment, there's 4 product sub epics. I think there were 8 or 9 sub epics for engineering. And so it just becomes very hard to follow. So it's mainly the fragmented nature and no SSOT.
Yeah, the only challenge I might see with that is if senior leadership expects us to link our epics to theirs, because if we want to organize it the way that makes the most sense for us, we won't be able to link it. I don't think you can have one epic be a child of 2 parents or have 2 parent epics.
Yeah.
Which is the challenge we have right now, right? Because it's very much organized towards like we have to bubble ours up to the dev subdepartment. But if we want to make it as structured in terms of like, I want to just see manage the whole, dive into this group or that group, that might be challenging.
Maybe we can accomplish it with epic labels and use those as kind of the way.
Yeah. Labels always come to save the day.
Labels always come to save the day.
Or link as blockers?
I don't think epics support that.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah. Cool. Dennis, over to you for item 4.
Trying to find my agenda. I think I thought I had another point, but I forgot. So I apologize. Yeah. So the point I have here, number 4, number 3, because Google Docs, whatever. Anyways, the point I had was I've seen multiple groups try to solve for like how we get people involved with the issue refinement process in different ways. We're in various stages of doing that. I think right now import pings everyone, compliance pings everyone, or it's kind of just there in the refinement board and everyone's open to refine it. Liam has a proposal for access to kind of have engineering managers assign the initial engineer where that engineer, after assessing it, gives it to another one, kind of like how we review merge requests, which is a different style as well. So I'm curious on what people think on what the best strategy is. So right now, compliance is also discussing like, could we perhaps do something like a reviewer roulette where we just randomly assign different engineers issues to refine. Hopefully that removes any like subconscious bias for like, I think that's too complicated, or I don't actually find that particularly interesting, so therefore I will just try to do my best to avoid it. Or even just the bystander effect where it's like, I see a bunch of assignees or I see people already discussing it, so I just don't know if my opinion is worth it or that kind of thing. Various different aspects which could be preventing people or I don't know. I think it would just better optimize the refinement process. So I don't know what people's thoughts are. There's a couple of points here that people have written down. So Jeremy, I don't know if you want to verbalize your point first.
Yeah, I think that based off of what I've heard, a lot of teams are trying to optimize and solve for this problem. And I think it's great to have groups like explore different ways of approaching it. But I think at some point, like we should converge on the thing that's working the best. Like, I think that if we don't know what that is, fine, let's continue to experiment and try to understand what that is. But if like one group is clearly a standout in terms of their ability to get issues refined, is consistently like coming to planning, like extremely well prepared, then I think we should just converge around what that process, if it is a big part of the why of why they're so good at planning. So that's the question I would pose to the group is so do we have like a clear sense of what the best way of approaching this is? If not, then I'm fine with us continuing to experiment. But based off of what I know, like some groups are quite effective at this right now.
Yeah, and I'm not I'm not bringing this up right now to converge on one yet. I think we're all still experimenting, so I think that's fine. I'm just kind of raising it that, I do think we should be able to experiment and find what works best. And Harris, I think I'd love to get to your point as well, to see, does this approach make sense for the size of team and things like that. So, I'm totally supportive of, having groups try their approaches, and then we just can come back in 1 or 2 milestones time and see, how we did as a result, and see if there's certain strategies that work better for different team setups. So yeah.
So
Harris, did you want to vocalize?
Yeah, I'll speak to mine. So yeah, I agree. We should keep going. I don't feel like we know what works best because I think this roulette is just starting up. So we'll see how that works. And I think we should probably just at this point also start learning from each other. So kind of, I'd like to hear how that's going, and I can also share how like being everybody is going, and we can probably all think the pros and cons of some of these. But I'd like to just get to a problem we're solving when we are trying to converge. Like, I just want to make sure that we have an actual problem that we're solving, and then therefore trying to make a change to address that, and not just kind of talk about theoretical, like, what could be wrong with this approach, but is it really a problem for the group or not? And if the groups are working fine and there are 2 groups that have 2 different approaches and each approach is best for them, then that's fine too. But I'd like to keep talking, keep sharing, because I'm curious to learn how the other approaches are going.
The ideal process will, if I had to wave a magic wand and define, you talked about the problem, is we are consistently able to refine issues ahead of synchronous planning calls specific to direction issues for individual groups. So like the most important work that is the most important to our strategy and our vision for each individual group, all of that work is being refined like according to our timeline, ahead of schedule, where it's just, like actually like doing the planning work of assigning things to a milestone is just something that can almost be done like asynchronously, where like everything is like by the time we have to commit to a release scope, we almost don't need like a synchronous call because it's just such a boring meeting of just pulling issues into like a milestone. That's what I consider the kind of like ideal state. And I don't know if anyone has like achieved that consistent. I know I never was able to when I was more involved on manage. So I think that's kind of the goal in my mind.
I agree with you, Jeremy, that would be our goal, and we should try to get there and see whoever comes closest, and we can learn from each other again. But yeah, I agree that we should try to do that.
So I agree, but I think so the compliance group has done some experimenting over the last 3 milestones and trying to strike the balance between capacity we set aside for refinement and then capacity for feature work. And I feel like my gut feeling so far is that getting to that utopian planning process will be really difficult, because if we want enough time so that engineers can then dedicate the mental effort to like helping refine issues, then feature work has to give. But if we have less feature work, then what do they work on in that delay between async communication? And then I feel like it's really a really tough challenge to figure out, because I don't know, but I know Dennis and I have talked briefly about maybe setting aside some time on Fridays and making Friday like the day where we all kind of crowdsource as a group, dedicated time to refinement, and maybe that's one style of addressing that. But yeah, it'll be a challenge for sure to get to that point where we can just like pull from backlog because of that dynamic.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that depends on the individual contributor as well. Some like to refine issues as a time filler between merge request reviews and things like that, and others like to time box it or time box is the right term. So that Friday concept would work best for them. So at that point, I think we would definitely want to just like open it up, and that also might be how we differentiate these strategies across groups, right? Because size is one dimension, but perhaps how the group generally works, they maybe more prefer to have a time box versus others that don't. So that's a valid case for just having different strategies as well. So I think as far as like, I think there were other, Melissa, you had a point as well. I just want to make sure you had the opportunity.
Oh, yeah. And I just had another thought too. I'm like, I wonder if this is something that gets better over time, right? Because it's like, okay, you're refining, right? And you have enough to fill your milestone and one issue left over. I'm just like saying this, right? And then as you keep doing it, right, you get more and more of a backlog of pre-refined issues, right? And then that's what has happened to me in the past, right? When I've started like a new refinement process. And then like over 4 or 5 milestones, now you get to that utopian place where you have like all these pre-refined issues, right? You don't need to worry as much. So I also wonder if that's something that will happen, where we don't immediately see this, ideal state, but eventually we will. And as I'm thinking also about like smaller teams versus larger teams, right? I think it might be a dynamic similar to like reviews, right? Where it's like when it's a smaller team, right? Everybody reviews everybody's code just because you have less people, right? And the kind of like, I don't know, goal is to have like 2 people review or however many, right? And that, because you're smaller, means it's all your other team members, right? But when it's a larger team, it's not everybody else, right? It's just 2 people. So I wonder if we kind of approach refinement in the same way, right? Where we say at least 2 engineers or 3 engineers or however many, right, have to review an issue and weigh it and refine it. That sets us up better for a dynamic of like small versus large teams. It's still standard, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
No, I'm sorry. My apologies.
No, please.
I was just gonna say, sorry, it was a little lag. I totally agree with you, Melissa. I think that your point about getting better over time, maybe that implies that it would be worth our while to spike into some of these issues if like there's like a significant number of issues that are like ready for refinement but just need like a engineering spike to be able to get them to ready for development. I mean, maybe I don't know if I'd want to make that like a regular part of like how we operate, but maybe that's one way that we can kind of get ahead of that. But I think that you're totally right there. I don't know about like mandating like a number of team members to be able to like refine or put input into something. Like for instance, if like Drew on Access like takes a look at like an LDAP issue or an authentication issue, like he's a subject matter expert. I think we can kind of like roll with his kind of assessment. So it's one of those things. So I think on import, they do a pretty good job of just checking in at a certain point, like requesting feedback from the team. One or more people kind of provide their input, and then the PM will just say like, oh, okay, based off of this, I think it's ready for development. Like people let me know if like that's not the case, but we're going to go ahead and move this based off of the input from person. And so I think that also is totally fine.
Cool. So yeah, we'll continue to experiment and see how things go. I mean, reviewer or refiner roulette doesn't work particularly well in some of the groups that just have, for example, one front-end engineer, because it'll just doesn't really, you can't add randomness to a single choice. But let's see what happens. As far as an action item, just to kind of have a takeaway on this and to keep track of this, I don't know if it's like an experiment section or something like that in our stage page, but I'll create a merge request to just kind of document what is our kind of ideal state that we would like to strive for, like, refined backlog, how we expect planning meetings to go, and then the various different ways we're trying to achieve this. And then we can go from there, just to kind of keep it as a regular point to check in. Well, not regular, but like a point we can check in on. Does that make sense?
Cool.
Does it sound reasonable?
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Awesome.
Good. And thanks to you and Harris for both being problem oriented. I think it's a very good point to try to figure out what problem or state we're trying to get to. So I had the last point. I just wanted to verify that we're tracking kind of milestone capacity the same way across the stage. I just wanted to verify that at least our aspiration should be to use weight. And it looks like there's a number of comments around in support of weight. So Martin, I mean, you have the first item. Feel free to voice it over.
Sure. So basically what we did in the last milestone is we tried to apply weights to all our issues, and then we tracked the weight for the upcoming milestone planning. I guess that's what's more expressive rather than counting issues, because you don't really know how big an issue eventually turns out. So in my opinion, weight is the way to go, but open for feedback and other options here. Liam's not on the call.
I totally agree. I'll voice over what Liam says. Liam's created those dashboards in SciSense, and it sounds like his intent is to track both. It sounds like import has some limited historical weight data, so it's hard to use weight when you're starting from zero. But it sounds like weight is ultimately the metric that we want to be able to use, which is great.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
After you, Dennis.
Oh, sorry. No, we can go in order. I didn't even have a point on this.
Yeah, I think we have some pretty good history for both analytics and compliance now for weight, which basically has just come from really making sure everybody is making sure that weights are applied on every issue that gets executed. And one of the little tricks with that is making sure we pull the weight off of anything that gets closed without execution, that kind of thing. So just kind of good housekeeping makes it, which is fairly easy, gives you a good idea of historical capacity. And just something I wanted to mention, I added a link here to the agenda. Velocity analytics is something I would love to build into the product for tracking this, both for historical, understanding historical productivity and planning for future capacity.
Dennis.
I have a question.
I'm all for
it. When are we scheduling that?
Good question.
Yeah.
I'll join that question too. Like, hey, aren't we the group that's supposed to build this?
Yep.
Fun fact, Matt may remember this, but I actually talked about velocity analytics on my assignment for my interview. Because that's one of the things that I was surprised. I'm like, we don't have velocity analytics? What?
I could not believe it. I actually rummaged through the menu to see where it is, because I just couldn't believe there isn't. velocity chart somewhere.
Yeah. Ah, John Mason.
So-
You picked the right call to skip.
I was gonna say, can we like make the executive or like herd mentality? I don't know what the right word is, but like, can we just say like, let's take a 2-week hackathon and just get this done?
All for it.
I'll code.
I actually already wrote the code. I beat you to it, Harris.
He's got the scripts. We just need a UI around it.
The code's
Oh,
written. Yeah,
that's
we just
awesome.
we just need front end to build the UI, and we're good to go.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Dan, you should-
Done. Ship it.
I'll take like a 2 weeks off and we'll get it done.
So are we recording this as an action item for Dennis too?
It's already recorded. So let me get through my OKRs first because it already been slipping. And then if it doesn't get done by then, I'll definitely take it as a Q3.
Can we add it as a Q3 OKR?
I'm literally saying like you heard it. It's recorded. Like this will be in Q3 OKR if it's not done sooner. So.
Oh jeez. All right, y'all. Was there more to say about this? I accidentally closed the agenda.
I'm just parroting.
Yeah.
So
Harris, I didn't know if you wanted to voice over your comments. You said
No, I think you did well. Yeah, we just started that. So yeah, we want to switch to weights, but we are probably gonna compare weights to issue count this time around, just to kind of get a baseline and make sure that we can trust it. So if we feel good with the weights, we'll keep going with the weights.
awesome. Cool. Thank you all. All right, that's it for this call on the agenda. Thanks for another great conversation, y'all. Have a great rest of your week. See ya.
bye.